So in this video, we are going to look at how to do vaccines well. So how you as an expectant parent can be preparing for your child's vaccine appointments. I've got some references and research on this topic, but I'm also going to be giving my own personal experience as a pediatric nurse and things that I have seen and things that I would recommend you guys doing or not doing.
So in this video, we're going to look at how do you prepare for your child's first vaccine appointment. Then what do you do as your child gets vaccines? How do you help them? And then what are you doing after your child gets vaccines? What do you need to be watching for? What do you need to expect? So first, the most important thing you can do to get prepared is to educate yourself, to look for references and resources that are reliable, trustworthy, and unbiased. Educate yourself so that you are comfortable with your decision and that you are ready to make that decision because you know it's the right decision. Remember that as an infant, your child's primary comfort item is you, and they're also watching how you react to gauge how they are going to respond. So you need to be preparing yourself to know that how you're acting is going to be how your child acts. If you're acting afraid leading up to it, they're going to feed off of the fear that you have, and they're going to be afraid themselves. The biggest thing to remember, know your child is going to do great. You are doing the best thing you can to protect them, and your child will do well. They may not like it right whenever they get their vaccines, but they will do fine after, and vaccines are safe, and there are very minor side effects to watch for, which we're going to talk about. Another way you can prepare is the very first appointment with your healthcare provider. See if they have a vaccine schedule so that you know what to expect and when to expect it. And that way you can be looking into each of the vaccines before you come to the appointment.
On this slide, we're going to look at the do's and don'ts of preparing for vaccine visits. The first thing I would recommend not doing is using shots as a way to scare your child. And you may be an expectant parent and say, I would never do that. I can't imagine. I don't know why he's even talking about this. I talk about it because I see it often. I see parents bringing their child back saying, be good or the doctor is going to give you a shot. Or they'll threaten their child and say, if you don't do something, you're going to get a shot. This will build a relationship of fear between the child and the doctor or the nurse. And that's not what we want. We want the child to look at the doctor and nurse and feel like they are going to be taken care of and kept healthy. And so never use shots as a threat or a punishment, because that will cause the child to be very frightened every time a healthcare worker comes into the room because they're afraid they're in trouble or that they're about to get a shot. So never use the word shot or vaccines as a punishment. Also, do not surprise your child. I will sometimes walk in and the child had no idea that they were about to get a vaccine, even though it was just being talked about. They didn't realize that it was going to apply to them. And this will send a child into fight or flight. They're either going to run out of the room and scream and yell, or they are going to fight back because they are scared right then because they did not know that this was going to happen. Now, as a parent, you will know what's best for your child. This doesn't mean you need to start talking to your child a week ahead of time and telling them what's going to happen, because you might find out that your child is more anxious and will then worry about it for a week. And that's not what you want. You want to tell your child with enough time for them to begin thinking about it and start coping with it. So I would just not recommend surprising them with vaccines. Now, you're going to run into situations where you didn't realize your child is going to get a vaccine that day, and that's going to happen. But if you can, always have your doctor's vaccine schedule and try to keep track of which visit your child is there for and whether they're going to get vaccines, just so you can prepare them ahead of time instead of surprising them. So, things to do. Talk with your child beforehand about getting vaccines. Tell them that the vaccine is going to help them stay healthy and to help keep them from getting sick. Talk to them beforehand instead of surprising them. And whenever you're talking to them, I recommend reassuring them, explaining, and then moving on. So this means comforting them, tell them that it's going to be okay, explaining to them what's going to happen, how it's meant to help them, how it's meant to help others, and then move on to a different topic. If you dwell on something and just go round and round, it's going to build up that anxiety. And I think that reassuring, explaining, and moving on then will allow your child time to think about it more and rationalize and come to their own terms. But just be honest with your child and talk to them whenever they ask questions. But then just try not to dwell on the topic too long. Also, bring a comfort object. Bring a blanket. Bring a stuffed animal. Whatever your child wants or picks that they can hold during their vaccines or hold after. Also remember that you as the parent are your child's best comfort object, which means that you need to be present. You need to be there to help them. And so you need to try to be at all the vaccine appointments if you can. I see sometimes an aunt or someone brings a child to their appointment, or a friend even, and that's not who the child wants. And so I would just try to be at any vaccine appointment you can. Last, trust your own research. If you have looked up vaccines and you're comfortable with them and you feel like you understand them, don't go on the internet message boards looking for conflicting information, because you will find it. There are parents out there that will tell you horror stories of things that happened when their child got vaccines, or something that they have heard from a friend of a friend happened to their child. This is all unreliable information, and it is that one person's opinion. You need to find resources that are trustworthy and reliable and unbiased. You're going to find people online who will say stories to scare people, or even make up stories to scare people away from vaccines because it's in their agenda to keep people from getting vaccines. So trust your own research instead of relying on third-hand information.
So, it's the day of. How are you going to help your child as they get their vaccines? The first thing you want to remember, remain calm. Just walk into the room calm, be calm throughout the appointment, and stay calm while they get their vaccines. Your child is watching you to see how they need to respond, and so just remember to try to stay as calm as you can. Also, follow the expert's advice. This would be the provider, the nurse, the medical assistant, whoever's giving the vaccines. Because if they're like me, they've given thousands and thousands of shots. So we do have a lot of experience and know how to do them well. There's things that we have in our mind that you may not be aware of. We are giving the shots in a certain order because we know that children usually tolerate some vaccines better earlier on, and then you save the ones that might hurt more until the end so that the child is not as frightened at the very beginning. So we're keeping that in mind. We also know the best technique. We know not to aspirate the needle, which is an old injection technique that just caused more pain and caused the vaccine to last longer. So we have all these things that we're remembering. We know the best ways to hold. We know the best ways to give the vaccine and keep your child calm. So follow the nurses or the doctor's advice on whoever's giving the vaccine. Now remember, your input is valuable too. We're going to get into that here in just a minute. Also, the most important thing, be with your child. That doesn't mean standing next to them or standing in the room. I mean be with them, be present. One thing I see a lot right now is parents who like to get a video playing on a phone or on a tablet for their kid to watch. And I'm talking about like an infant to watch a YouTube video. What that does is that takes the parent's focus off of the child, and the nurse, whoever's giving the vaccines, What we really need you to do right then is to keep track of your child's hands and to calm your child. I've seen lots of phones thrown across the room because a child was not happy when they got a shot and they just threw the phone that was meant to distract them. Spend the time with your child, comforting them, instead of trying to distract them with something else. Your child's best distractor is you, so remember that. There are a lot of good techniques to keep your child more calm as they get vaccines. There's a lot of different positions or ways we can hold them. So one thing whenever your child is really young is going to be the breastfeeding position, holding them in a manner as if you were breastfeeding or actually breastfeeding. Now, the nurse may have you stop breastfeeding right before they give the vaccine so your child doesn't take a big breath in whenever they get a shot and potentially choke, but holding them in that position is a good way to keep them calm. There's also the sitting position for kids that are a little bit older, where they're sitting on your lap facing forward. With all of those, I'm always going to say whatever the person giving the vaccines recommends as well, because there are some times whenever I'm not going to want the parent to hold the child if I'm having to give a lot of vaccines all at once, because that might make it harder to get to all the places that I need to get to, or it may make it take longer if I'm having to reposition or change. And it's always going to depend on how well the parent is holding as well. So there's a couple of different ways that the child can be held, but also take into account the person giving the vaccines what they think might be best in that situation. Always have a comfort object near. The best comfort object is you. But if your child has a special blanket or stuffed animal that brings them comfort, you can bring that to the appointment and have it near them. The best thing is for the parent to be at the child's head, so that the parent can be looking at the child, talking to them, and also keeping track of the hands while the nurse is dealing with the child's legs where the vaccines are being given, usually whenever they're young. And then after it is done, as soon as the nurse puts the last band-aid on, or if they say it's okay to go ahead and pick them up and give them comfort quickly. And that's going to help them calm down and do better and rely on you as their comfort object. So then, what do we do after they get their vaccines? One of the most important things is you want to keep your child moving. If they got their vaccines on their legs or if they got them on their arms, you want them to keep moving it so that they get more blood flow to those muscles so that it gets absorbed faster. I always tell parents whenever a child is young and if they've gotten their vaccines on their legs, every diaper change is a good time to remember, get their legs and bicycle them around just to keep those legs moving for the next day or so. What we get tempted to do whenever we're older and we get vaccines is we go home and we just sit there and not want to move our arm because it's sore. But the more you move it, the less sore it will get and the faster it will start feeling better. You also want to keep your child hydrated. Sometimes kids don't want to eat or drink as much after they've gotten vaccines just because they don't feel as good as they normally do. So if they don't want to eat, that's usually okay. But biggest thing, keep them drinking. Get them something that they like to drink and just keep offering it to them so they stay hydrated. Being hydrated, they're also going to be less likely to run fever. The better hydrated you are, the better you're able to regulate your temperature. So keep your child hydrated. For pain management, the different things that you can do a cool compress, like a wet wash rag on the leg or arm where if they got their vaccines. That just helps the inflammation be less. Distraction's another good thing. It's okay if that's a day that you want to go home and put on a show or a movie for your kid to be watching something else or get interested in another activity or toy, something to play with so that they're not thinking about it. That's another good way to distract. And then there's always pain medicines. Tylenol whenever they're young, ibuprofen whenever they're 6 months or older. You can always be using those pain medicines as you need to. Some kids don't need it, some kids do. It's just whatever is more comfortable for you and whatever works best for your child. But those are other good ways to help the inflammation and the soreness that can occur after vaccines.
So, things you can expect after vaccines. You can expect to see a fever, but that's usually only in the first 24 hours or so. It's not something you're going to see a week after. So if you're seeing a fever a week after vaccines, it's probably something else, and so you might need to get that checked out. You can see pain or redness at the injection site. Something was injected, which is going to cause inflammation, which is the redness, and that inflammation causes pain, so you can expect to see that. You can see fussiness, especially in the younger kids, because they can't tell you what's wrong, so they just fuss and whine because they have that soreness. You can see decreased appetite after vaccines. That's why it's important to keep them hydrated and push fluids. So those are the things you can expect to see after any vaccine. There are some less common things you can see. You can sometimes see a rash. You can sometimes see a high fever. The normal fever is usually going to be on the lower end, maybe 100, 101. But there are some cases where children will get a high fever, 103, 104 after the vaccines, but that's not as common. Then there's also excessive fussiness. So this is a child who cries or screams for several hours after their vaccines. That's not a normal thing, not a common thing to see, but it is something that you should be mindful of. And the biggest thing is, if you are in doubt, if you are seeing something that concerns you, that you wonder if it has to do with the vaccine or if it's something else, call your doctor. Always, whenever you're first starting to get vaccines, ask your doctor if they have like a nurse on call line or after hours phone line to be able to call on after hours or on the weekend if you have questions. So if you see something and you're concerned, call your doctor. It's okay. That's what they are there for, to talk through the things that you can expect to see and whether what you're seeing is due to the vaccines or something else.
So just to review, before vaccines, the most important thing you can do is do the research so that you are more comfortable. If you're more comfortable, you're going to be less stressed, and your stress is what will feed your child's stress. So do the research, find the information, the answers to the questions you're looking for so that you are more comfortable during the appointment. Also, never, ever use the doctor's office or shots as punishment to your child. It's not going to go well for them later on in life. They're always going to have a fear of going to the doctor. So never use those things as punishment or threaten them with it. Then listen to the experts and then be there for your child. Remember, you're also an expert about your child. So if the nurse is about to give the vaccines and you have something that you think you want to recommend, bring it up, let them know. And if they think that it can work with what they're doing, then they will happily let you do it. And then after their vaccines, continue giving comfort and know what to expect. And so look at some of these resources that I have to know the most common things to see after vaccines.
And we come to our references once again. I hope that you got some good information from this presentation. I would really recommend looking at this very first reference from the CDC. It'll be available on the reference page of the website. It had a lot of good information on how to prepare, what to do during and after vaccines, and it will link you to all of the vaccine information sheets so you can read up on each vaccine and what to expect. But again, all these references are available to you, and I hope that you look into them more. But I hope that this gave you some information of how to get prepared for your child's first vaccine appointment. Thanks. Bye.